here in Texas.
Hell to the yeah. What's up, everybody? It's me. That's right, the Triple B, Big Bad Bob here with you, otherwise known as Rob Clark, for another exciting edition of the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is episode number 240. 240. Wow. 240. Crazy. So today we're going to be talking about some things that was brought up on the last Quick Hits. And look, people, if you listen to this show and you are not currently subscribed to Quick Hits, a news and notes podcast on the JFK assassination that I do with my buddy Doug Campbell from the Dallas Action Podcast, then you are severely missing out. Okay, so if you're not already subscribed, just turn this shit off right now. Turn it off. Go to where you listen to your podcast and search for Quick Hits. Find it and subscribe. And go back and listen to all past 45 episodes that we've done together. You're missing out if you're not paying attention to that show. But just in case you're not, because I know we get new listeners all the time, I'm going to be talking about something that was brought up by a listener to Quick Hits named Andy Bridgehouse. And we're going to be talking about a little deuce coupe, or a little gray coupe, and some other various vehicles associated with the assassination in this episode. But before we do, let's hear a word from our scrumptiously delicious and spicy sponsor, Silk City Hot Sauce. Big Bad Bob here with you for Silk City Hot Sauces. Why Silk City? Because this hot sauce comes to you directly from Paterson, New Jersey, also known as Silk City. These hot sauces are 100% natural, gluten-free, vegan, contain no chemicals, fillers, dyes, or junk. Everything is packed into recyclable glass containers because glass doesn't leach weird flavors into the product. All other hot sauces are sourced in small batches from locally bought fresh peppers. It's all about the pepper, people. I'm telling you. Your boy, Big Bad Bob, loves his food like he loves his women. Hot and spicy, but not so hot you can't eat them. So, if you love yourself some sauce and you're tired of trying to transform your bland meat into something edible, with the tip of a jar, you will transform your life forever. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com, place an order, and upon checkout, enter the code GUNMAN, that's GUNMAN, for 20% off of your entire order. You won't regret it. Thank me later. Peace. Yeah, that's right. You can help support the show and get some damn fine tasting hot sauce to boot. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com. Enter the code GUNMAN at checkout. That's GUNMAN for 20% off your entire order. And look, big shout out to all the listeners who've already ordered hot sauce. Keep it going. Silk City loves you. My buddy Joe has ordered so much hot sauce, they sent him free swag. Represent. He sent me a picture of the newest T-shirt from Silk City Hot Sauce. Hell, I don't even have one, and I'm hawking their shit. So you order some hot sauce, they might hook you up too, so you can represent the dragon, baby. Yeah, the fire-breathing dragon. So in this episode, uh, actually, on the last Quick Hits episode, we had it in our listener email section, which is at the very end of the show. So some of you may have missed it if you tuned out earlier than that, which I don't know why you would, because the email section of that show is basically one of the best parts of the show. So you're an idiot if you're tuning out before you hear listener emails. That being said, um, we had a listener write in about a little gray coot, right? So in and of itself doesn't really mean much. There is an obscure phone call into a radio show by a little old lady named Wilma, who I'm going to play for you right now. So check this out.
Let's go to our final caller with you, Alex. First time caller. Hi there.
Hello,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I am Velma, and I live 100 miles from Dallas. I was living in Dallas at Clinton, and I had my car parked behind that Texas Depository book building.
Yes, sir.
I saw the shooter came up, and he had a very high-powered rifle. It was no bolt action, and
Well, now, let me ask you, please, because that rifle that they said Oswald used to kill Kennedy was apparently left upstairs. So you're saying you saw someone else come out with a high-powered rifle. Okay, tell me what happened then.
okay, I'm sitting in my car, and there's a gray dove-colored old one-seated Plymouth car sitting there, and there's a man with a felt hat on with a wide band, and he had on a suit, and he had black hair and real heavy eyebrows, and he'd look at me kind of dirty. Well, about that time, police car come and told this man to move, and he didn't move right away, and the police got out of his car, and I know later it was Tippy. And he told him, he said, I said move that car. Well, then this man that's in this old gray car, he went straight on around and went around this big building that was across the street from me. Tippett went the other way, so they must have met back there. Anyway, there were dozens of witnesses that saw.
Well, let me ask you this, Alex, because we're ready to hit the hour here. Did you say this to the Warren Commission, ma'am, or anybody else?
I haven't told anybody because I didn't want. We had 4 children I was having support in, and I didn't want to get shot. And I saw the man, and I could tell you how he dressed.
All right, I want you.
All right, so there you have it's either Wilma or Velma. Be a lot sexier if her name was Velma, like from Scooby Doo. Although she sounds in her 80s at that point, so not sure how sexy she was then, but she may have been sexier early in her age. But in and of itself, this is probably just some other nut job trying to insert themselves into the story, right? Of the assassination. We have several people who claim to have seen people run out the back of the depository with a rifle and all this jazz and different vehicles getting in certain different vehicles and this, that, and the other, right? So this story from Velma doesn't, really add too much or take away very much from the story in and of itself. But as Quick Hits listener Andy Bridgehouse pointed out, and kudos to him for finding some corroboration, we have from an article from October the 12th, 1964, entitled The Other Witnesses by George and Patricia Nash. Okay. This curious tidbit. So, in general, the article is trying to lay out a lot of these other witnesses that were ignored by the Warren Commission for whatever reason. Okay. So they first have Frank Wright, who lived in a ground floor apartment on 10th Street, about half a block east of the murder site. And he states, and I quote, I was sitting watching television with my wife. I was sitting in a chair next to the door. I wasn't but 2 steps from the door. I heard shots, and I knew it wasn't backfires. As soon as I heard them, I went out the door. I could see a police car in the next block, and it was toward the end of the next block. I could see it clearly. The police car was headed towards me. It was parked on the south side of the street. In other words, it was parked across the street from our apartment house. I saw a person right by the car. He had fallen down. It seems as if he had just fallen down. Maybe I saw him as he had just finished falling. He was on the ground, and then he turned over face down. Part of him was under the left front fender of the car. It seems to me that I saw him just as he hit the ground. I saw him turn over, and he didn't move any more. I looked around to see what had happened. I knew there had been a shooting. I saw a man standing right in front of the car. He was looking toward the man on the ground. He stood there for a while and looked at the man. I couldn't tell who the man was on the ground. The man who was standing in front of him was about medium height. He had on a long coat, and it ended just above his hands. I didn't see any gun. He ran around on the passenger side of the police car. He ran as fast as he could go, and he got into his car. His car was a gray, little old coupe. It was about a 1950 or 51, maybe a Plymouth. It was a gray car parked on the same side of the street as the police car, out beyond it from me. It was heading away from me. He got in that car and he drove away as quick as you could see. He drove down 10th Street away from me. I don't know how far he drove. And after he got into the middle of the next block between Patton and Crawford, I didn't look at him any more. I looked at the car where the man was. I looked to see what had happened there. About the same time as I came out, or maybe a little while after, a woman came down from her porch. She was at the house about 3 or 4 doors down from the intersection of 10th and Patton. The house was on the same side of the street as the police car. Just as the man in the car pulled away, he came toward the police car, and then she stepped back. I heard her shout, "Oh, he's been shot," throwing up her hands. Then she went back up toward the house. There was no one out there except me and that woman when I got there, except for the man I described earlier. I couldn't figure out who did the shooting. I didn't see a gun on the man who was standing in front of the car. There wasn't anyone else but the man who drove away and the woman who came down from her porch. I was the first one out. I knew there wasn't anyone else there at all. There wasn't any time at all until the ambulance got there. By the time the ambulance got there, there were maybe 25 more people outside. And then after a while, the police came up. After that, a whole lot of police came up. I tried to tell 2 or 3 people what I saw, but they didn't pay any attention. I've seen what came out on television and in the papers, but I know that's not what happened. I knew a man drove off in a gray car. Nothing in the world's going to change my opinion. I saw that man drive off in a gray coupe just as clear as I was born. I know what I saw. They can say all they want about a fellow running away, but I can't accept this because I saw a fellow get in a car and drive away. We have no way of knowing how this investigation could have ignored Wright, whether his memory is accurate or whether a plausible explanation for the mysterious man in this car might be a passerby, unwilling to be a witness. For our purposes here, such speculation is besides the point, which is simply why didn't this account come to the Commission's attention? The question becomes all the more relevant when it is realized that it was a call from Mrs. Wright that was responsible for the ambulance being dispatched, and the police had her address. I was sitting in my apartment watching television with my husband. We had just learned that the president was shot, and I was sitting in a chair with my back to the intersection of 10th and Denver. My husband was sitting across from me. I heard shots, and I immediately ran to the window. I heard 3 shots. From my window, I got a clear view of the man lying there on the street. He was there in the next block. I could see there was a man lying in the street. I didn't wait a minute. I ran to the telephone. I didn't look in the book or anything. I ran to the telephone, picked it up, and dialed 0. I said, "Call the police. A man's been shot." After that, I went outside to join my husband, and it wasn't but a minute till the ambulance got there. The operator took Mrs. Wright's address, 501 East 10th Street, and called the police. The police noted there was a shooting at 501 East 10th and pushed a buzzer connecting them by a direct line to the Dudley M. Hughes funeral home. The Dudley Hughes Funeral Home is the central ambulance dispatching point for southern Dallas. It either handles calls directly or calls other funeral homes in the system that cover the area. Dudley Hughes Jr., the dispatcher, took the call from the police. He filled out an ambulance call slip with the code 319, which means emergency shooting, and the address 501 East 10th Street. He put the slip into the time clock and stamped it 1:18 p.m., November 22nd, in the space marked "Time Called." Since the location was just 2 short blocks away, he told one of his own drivers, Clayton Butler, to respond. Butler and Eddie Kinsley ran down the steps, got into the ambulance, and took off with the siren screaming. Butler radioed his arrival at the scene at 1:18 p.m. within 60 seconds of leaving the funeral home. He remembers that there were at least 10 people standing around the man lying on the ground. It was not until he and his assistant pulled back a blanket covering Tippett that they realized the victim was a policeman. Butler ran back to his radio to inform headquarters. The radio was busy and he could not cut in. He yelled "Mayday" to no avail and went back to Tippett. The officer lay on his side, face down, with part of his body under the left front fender. Butler and Kinsley rolled him over and saw the bullet wound through Tippett's temple. Butler told us, "I thought he was dead then. It's not my position to say so, but we got him into the ambulance and we got going as quick as possible. On the way to the hospital, I finally let them know it was a policeman." The record shows that Butler called into the funeral home at 1:26 to say he had reached the hospital. Despite the fact that the ambulance was dispatched to 501 East 10th, no statement was ever taken from either of the Wrights. Mrs. Wright remembers that a man who did not identify himself came around 2 months after the president's assassination and talked with her for a few minutes. He took no notes and did not ask her to sign anything, did not speak to her husband, and did not ask if he had seen anything unusual. Clayton Butler, the ambulance driver, says he was questioned by the Dallas police when he arrived at the hospital, but not since then. Others never questioned include Butler's assistant, Eddie Kinsley, Dudley Hughes Jr., who dispatched the ambulance, and the managers of the apartment house facing the murder site. All these potential witnesses were in agreement on the lapse of time between the shots and the arrival of the police, which is in direct contradiction to Mrs. Helen Markham's statement. It is worth noting, in connection with Markham's reliability, that the lineup, which satisfied the commission as fair in its procedure, included only 3 persons besides Oswald for Markham to choose from: 2 18-year-olds and a 26-year-old Mexican man. Oswald, who had appeared on television before this lineup, was the only one whose face was cut and bruised. In the light of our own findings in the Tippett slaying, it appears quite possible that Markham came on the scene only after hearing the shots. And without Markham, there is no one to say precisely what happened between Tippett and Oswald. So, there you have that little tidbit, which, when taken into consideration with Velma's phone call. All right, so let's take a look at some other vehicles around Dealey Plaza. But first, let's give a couple more voices to some things going on to the rear of the school book depository. And what could have possibly been going on back there? What did Velma see, if anything? So we have a statement of a witness, James Richard Worwell. In this affidavit, made November 23rd, 1963, a 20-year-old white male says he looked up into the building after hearing the first shot and saw the barrel of a rifle sticking out of a window. While I was looking at the gun, it fired again. I got scared and ran from the location. While I was running, I heard the gun fire 2 more times. I ran from Elm Street to Pacific Street on Houston. When I was about 100 yards from the building, I stopped to get my breath and looked back at the building. I saw a white male, 5'8" to 5'10", dark hair, average weight or height, dark short or jacket open down front, no hat, didn't have anything in his hands, come out of the building and run in the opposite direction from me. So, apparently James Worrell, 20-year-old guy, was out in front of the school book depository building. He saw or heard the first shot and saw the barrel of a rifle sticking out of a window. And while he was looking at it, it fired again. And he got scared and he ran from the location. So now he's running down the west side of the school book depository in between that building and the Dow Tex building. And approximately 100 yards, he stopped running to get his breath and turned around and looked back at the building, at which time he saw a white male, 5'8" to 5'10", dark hair, average weight for height, dark short or jacket open down front, no hat, didn't have anything in his hands, come out of the building and start running in the opposite direction from me, which would have been towards Main Street up Houston. So, was there time enough, for the time sequence of the shots for the alleged assassin from the 6th floor to make his way across the entire building, hide the rifle behind some boxes, skippity-doo-dah down the stairs, and exit out the back of the building, all in the time it took this guy to run 100 yards. Now, 100 yards is, of course, the size of a football field. And depending on how motivated you are, it's likely you could get off at a pretty good speed there, especially if you thought somebody was shooting a gun. So, how long does it take to run 100? Usain Bolt ran 100 yards in 2016 in 9.23 seconds. So, even if you double that for a slow white man, I mean, this kid was still 20, okay? It wasn't like we had a 60-year-old guy running the 100-yard dash. But even if you double Usain Bolt's time to 18 seconds, I highly doubt that whoever he saw there would have been the alleged assassin. It was likely someone else, if he saw anybody at all. But I don't think there would have just been enough time for that all to take place, according to Worrell's timeline. Then we have this FBI memorandum from March 6, 64. At 9 p.m. today, James Romack contacted this office in regard to an article appearing in March 6, 64 edition of the Dallas Times Herald. This instant article by Darwin Payne concerned one James Worrell, who claims to have observed an unknown man run from the back door of the school book depository building immediately after the assassination. Now, Romack stated he worked for, at the pertinent time, the MKT Railroad on the loading docks immediately behind the school book depository. Romack stated on November 22nd, 1963, that he was eating lunch on the loading dock behind the school book depository when he heard 3 shots. Immediately afterwards, he saw a Dallas policeman running along the east side of the school book depository north toward him. Romack allegedly told the officer that he would watch the back of the school book depository, and the officer went on back towards the front of the building. Romack stated that subsequent to hearing the 3 shots, he did not leave the area of the loading dock and was able to observe all activity behind the school book depository. In doing so, Romack stated he definitely never saw anyone leave by the back door of the school book depository as alleged by Worrell in the above mentioned newspaper story. So, that also negates Velma's story as well. So, believe what you will, folks. Believe what you will. All right, let's get into the more famous story of a vehicle in Dealey Plaza. Yes, folks, I'm talking about the white Nash Rambler that Roger Craig saw pick somebody up that looked a hell of a lot like Lee Harvey Oswald on Elm Street immediately following the assassination. Now, if you head over to jfkassassinationgallery.com, that's Robin Unger's photographic record site of the JFK assassination, and look at the William Allen series of photographs taken in Dealey Plaza, you will see a couple different pertinent photographs of this situation here. And among them, most notably, is the photo of Buddy Walters with an unidentified FBI agent kind of looking in the ground near the manhole cover on the side of Elm Street. And what's interesting about this photo is not only does it appear that they are chasing a bullet in the ground there, but the big Hertz clock on top of the school book depository is prominently seen, and it says 1240. And in the background, you can see Elm Street and the school book depository, and you can see vehicles on the street. And interestingly enough, across the street, you can see Roger Craig looking in that direction. There is various photos out there showing a white, quote unquote, Nash Rambler on Elm Street. There's a blurry photo of the individual that Roger Craig states that he saw run down the grassy area beside the school book depository to get in this vehicle. Now, according to Roger Craig, he states that after returning to the Dallas Police headquarters, now, of course, Roger Craig was a sheriff's deputy, not a Dallas police officer, but he did help participate in the search of the 6th floor of the school book depository. And this, of course, is in 1963. I believe in 1961, he had won like Sheriff's Deputy of the Year or something. Outstanding citizen, highly respected, honest guy, very hardworking, good at his job. Nothing but accolades by his boss, Bill Decker, actually. So why would this guy, Roger Craig, seemingly want to start a false rumor or a lie about something that he supposedly saw that day? Now, he says that he went to the Dallas Police headquarters, to the Homicide and Robbery Bureau, and that Fritz was interrogating Oswald, and that he pulled Fritz to the side and said that he saw this guy get into a white Nash Rambler on Elm Street and leave the area. And that upon hearing this, Oswald said, "I told you I did," and then states something like, "Well, that's Mrs. Payne's vehicle, her station wagon. Don't try to bring her into this," or something along those lines. Now, in subsequent testimony, to the Warren Commission, Fritz would deny that this conversation ever took place. He says that he never talked to Craig. And Oswald never said anything like that. So, again, we have the conundrum of why this upstanding, respected, decorated sheriff's deputy would make something up about the worst day in Dallas history when the president is murdered in broad daylight in the middle of the street in front of him. Why would you make something like this up? This doesn't make sense. So maybe he didn't. But let's get into the story a little bit. So, as I mentioned before, his boss, Sheriff Bill Decker, on December the 13th, when questioned by the FBI about this, advised that Deputy Sheriff Roger Craig, in his opinion, is a reliable employee who is completely honest in his belief that he saw Oswald getting into a white Nash Rambler immediately after the shooting. Even though Craig is obviously mistaken in his belief, Decker said that he had discussed this identification with Craig and pointed out to him that witnesses corroborated by the transfer found in Oswald's possessions showed that Oswald left the assassination scene on November 22nd by a city bus and a taxicab. Craig stated to Decker that he was aware of all that and knew about this. I knew that this indicated that Craig was mistaken in his identification, but he still saw someone getting into a white Nash Rambler and still believed this person was Lee Harvey Oswald. So, despite being told by Dallas police that, hey, dummy, we know that Oswald got on a bus and then into a taxi and made his way to his rooming house, you obviously did not see him get into a Nash Rambler. Yet Craig still vehemently believed that he did. Also, this alleged Nash Rambler that Craig saw can be seen in the Weaver Polaroid on page 243, Richard Trask Pictures of the Pain, in the Railroad Yard in Murray Photos number 5 and number 6, and the Bell film seen in Grodin's The Killing of a President, page 68. There's also a Rambler station wagon seen in the documentary film 4 Days of November as the ambulance leaves Parkland Hospital for Love Field. All of which are very interesting. So, in 1993, I believe, let's see here, Dave Perry, a somewhat lone nutter from Texas, wrote an article entitled The Rambler Man, shitting on Roger Craig. And so I'm going to read a couple things out of here that are interesting. Author and researcher Penn Jones Jr. briefly reviewed the episode in his 1969 paperback Forgive My Grief 3. On page 29, Jones asserted, Craig insisted from the day of the assassination that he saw Oswald race down the grassy area and get into a station wagon like the one owned by Ruth Payne of Irving. Curiously, this important allegation that the Payne vehicle might have been used in the assassination lay dormant until Jones published the story. Now, what exactly did Craig say? Because obviously, Mrs. Payne, Ruth Payne, didn't own a white Nash Rambler station wagon. At least not that I'm aware of. So, what exactly did Roger Craig say? He says, as I have earlier stated, the time was approximately 12:40 when I ran into fellow deputy Buddy Walters. Traffic was very heavy as Patrolman Baker, assigned to Elm in Houston, had left his post, allowing traffic to travel west on Elm Street. As we were scanning the curb, I heard a shrill whistle coming from the north side of Elm Street. I turned and saw a white male in his 20s running down the grassy knoll there from the direction of the Texas School Book Depository building. A light green Rambler station wagon was coming slowly west on Elm Street. The driver of the station wagon was a husky-looking Latin with dark, wavy hair, wearing a tan windbreaker-type jacket. He was looking up at the man running towards him. He pulled over to the north curb and picked up the man coming down the hill. I tried to cross Elm Street to stop them, and find out who they were, but the traffic was too heavy and I was unable to reach them in time. They drove away, going west on Elm Street. I ran to the front of the schoolbook depository where I asked for anyone involved in the investigation. There was a man standing on the steps at that time, and he turned to me and said, "I'm with the Secret Service." He showed little interest in the persons leaving the building. However, he seemed extremely interested in the description of the Rambler. This was the only part of my statement which he wrote down in his little pad he was holding. Point: Mrs. Ruth Payne, the woman Marina Oswald lived with in Irving, Texas, owned a Rambler station wagon at that time of this same color. I had said that Dallas Police Captain Will Fritz had said to Oswald, "This man saw you leave." Oswald said, "I told you people I did." Fritz then said, "Now take it easy, son. We're just trying to find out what happened." And then to Oswald, "What about the car?" Which Oswald replied, "That station wagon belongs to Mrs. Payne. Don't try to drag her into this." Note: Fritz said car. Station wagon was not mentioned by anyone but Oswald. So, in his statements to the Warren Commission, David Beelan asked Craig if there was anything of importance that had not been discussed. More in Volume 6, page 271. Mr. Craig, no, except for the fact that it came out later that Mrs. Payne does own a station wagon, and it has a luggage rack on top. And this came out, of course, later after I got back to the office. I didn't know about this. Buddy Walters brought it up. I believe they went by the house, and the car was parked in the driveway. Jones' article depended on Craig's confirmation to support the Rambler story. However, where was Craig's proof that Ruth Payne owned a Rambler station wagon, let alone the same color? Granted, Craig was an ex-sheriff and likely had extensive investigative skill, but I never heard claims that he was a student of the Kennedy assassination. So, did Ruth Payne own a Nash Rambler station wagon? Well, she didn't. She actually owned a 1955 Chevy Nomad. But, to someone of the untrained eye who wasn't that familiar with differentiating car descriptions, a lot of these station wagons, whether it be a Ford or a Buick or Plymouth or a Nash or Ford or Chevy, a lot of these station wagon models look the same, much in the way most minivans look the same. It's just a common design of the time. And someone not too familiar really couldn't probably tell the difference between a Ford minivan, a Chevy minivan, or a Plymouth minivan. They just know that, hey, that's a minivan, or that's a station wagon, or it looks like a Nash Rambler, if that is the brand you're familiar with. So, I'm not too worried about that part of the description, but the color thing has me a little worried because we go from white to light green, which is, of course, a big difference. So how do we get from white to light green? Well, Craig explains it this way. I said the Rambler station wagon was light green. The Warren Commission changed it to a white station wagon. So Dave Perry, curious, went back to Craig's deposition of November 25th, 63, and concluded the Warren Commission could alter the testimony, but would have had to go to extreme lengths to change a document obtained 3 days after the assassination by the FBI, in which it appears that Craig made the statement that he also noticed an automobile traveling west on Elm, which he feels was a white Nash Rambler station wagon with a luggage rack on top. So that seemed to confirm that Craig originally thought the car was white. I still couldn't understand why color was so important. Why is it necessary for the station wagon to be green rather than white? So when Miss Payne describes her automobile for the Warren Commission, she states, quote, "It is a 55 Chevrolet station wagon, green, needing paint, which we bought secondhand, and it is in my name." So again, in order to kind of tie this vehicle to Oswald, it's got to be the same color. You know, but again, implying that somebody picked Oswald up in the middle of the street right after the assassination would definitely imply that there was a conspiracy, because it takes more than one person to make a conspiracy. Of course, Penn Jones Jr. Consider the importance of Roger Craig, that Craig insisted from the day of the assassination that he saw Oswald race down the grassy area and get into a station wagon like the one owned by Mrs. Ruth Payne of Irving. So that is Dave Perry's attempt to debunk the Roger Craig Nash Rambler story, which is all fine and good if that's what you're trying to do. You can pick a lot of things apart, but we know that the Warren Commission wasn't adverse to taking things off the record and even downright altering a witness's testimony to be either slightly different or vastly different, i.e., see Victoria Adams. So, with something like this, where it's hard to discount just out of hand the testimony of a very respected sheriff's deputy, you can't just outright call him a kooky kook, but you can alter things a little bit to make his in situations, that's probably not even a word, his intimations, not credible, i.e., tying the station wagon to Ruth Payne, but making it an entirely different color. Well, you said white. Hers is green, or light green. You can't possibly have seen the same vehicle, so that really doesn't matter. Much along the same lines of changing the length of the rifle or the sack that came into the rifle or the TSBD that day by Bill Frazier. A lot of these little things are changed and altered a little bit, just to make some things questionable. But was Craig telling the truth? Well, in certain instances, we can point out that Roger Craig was flat out full of shit about certain things, such as, and stamped right there on the barrel, 7.65 Mauser. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Craig, but Mauser never stamped 7.65 Mauser on their barrels. That's just a fact. So, how you can sit here and say definitively that that's what you saw is either a bold-faced lie or you're really, really, really wrong and misremembering things. So, is he lying about the Nash Rambler shit too? Well, it would appear that he is not, due to the testimony of some other witnesses. So let's hear from a few of them, shall we? And it's important that these are as early as they are. So, for November 23rd, 1963, FBI document to Special Agent in Charge Dallas from Special Agent Earl Haley. Mr. Roy Cooper, Route 1, Euless, Texas, furnished following information at 12:15 p.m. this date. He related an incident about a Nash Rambler being seen leaving the building in Elm in Houston on 11/22/63. All right, so he is furnishing this information to the FBI unsolicited less than 24 hours after the assassination, which is important. He was driving his car and following his boss, who was driving a Cadillac. They were coming south on Houston and had to wait for the parade, and the incident happened shortly after they reached the intersection. Cooper observed a white male, somewhere between 20 and 30 years of age, wave at a Nash Rambler, light colored, as it pulled out and was ready to leave from Elm in Houston. This station wagon pulled out real fast in front of the Cadillac driven by his boss, and his employer had to stop abruptly and nearly hit this Nash Rambler. Cooper could not see who was driving the Nash Rambler and could not furnish any further description of the man who jumped into the car. They drove off at a rather fast rate of speed and went down towards the overpass toward Oak Cliff. Cooper was following his immediate supervisor, a Mr. Marvin Robinson, who was taking his Cadillac home to Oak Cliff. Cooper was then to pick up Robinson, and they were going to go back to their employment in Garland, Texas in his car. He advised that Marvin Robinson resides on Marcellus Street. So they have this lead that they're going to follow up and talk to Mr. Marvin Robinson, which they do. Same day, March 23rd, 63. Marvin Robinson advised that approximately between 12:30 and 1 on the afternoon of November 22nd, while traveling west on Elm Street, he crossed the intersection of Elm and Houston Street shortly after the assassination of President Kennedy. Robinson stated that after he had crossed Houston Street and was in front of the school book depository building, a light-colored Nash station wagon suddenly appeared before him. He stated this vehicle stopped, and a white male came down the grass-covered incline between the building and the street and entered the station wagon, after which it drove away in the direction of the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. Robinson stated he does not recall the license number on the station wagon or whether or not it even had a Texas license plate. He stated further that he did not pay particular attention to the individual who entered the station wagon and would be unable to identify him. Robinson was unable to furnish any pertinent information concerning the assassination of President Kennedy. Well, I'd say that's pretty pertinent information, but you see how they discredit people who corroborate other people with proof of a possible conspiracy to assassinate the President of the United States. But were they the only ones to see this mysterious Nash Rambler in Dealey Plaza? Well, apparently not. So Richard Randolph Carr, another questionable, in quotes, witness, on February the 3rd, 1964, was re-interviewed to clarify information previously furnished on January 4th, 64. So he goes through this thing and he states that I, Randolph Carr, make the following voluntary statement to Paul Scott, who has identified himself to me as a special agent, blah, 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 blah. And he goes on and tells about how he was looking for work and that morning he dropped his wife and kid off at the Parkland Hospital and then went downtown to look for work. And he saw that the new courthouse was being constructed on the corner of Houston and Commerce Street. So he went there and he starts walking up the building. Well, when he got to about the 6th floor, ironically enough, shots rang out in Dealey Plaza, and he stated that he witnessed a heavyset individual who was wearing a hat, a tan sport coat, and horn-rimmed glasses, not in the end window next to Houston Street, but I believe it was in the second window over from Houston Street. I continued up on the stairway. A minute or so later, heard a noise which I took to be the backfire of an automobile or a firecracker. So he goes on through all this stuff, right? And decides that maybe he should go down and check out what's going on. He didn't actually talk to the supervisor there at the new construction site. And he says, while I was on Houston Street near the Commerce Street intersection, I saw a man who I believe was identical with the man I had earlier seen looking out the window of the school book depository building. This man, walking very fast, proceeded on Houston Street, south to Commerce Street, and then east on Commerce Street to Record Street, which is 1 block over from Houston. This man got into a 1961 or 62 light gray Rambler station wagon, which was parked just north of Commerce on Record Street. This station wagon, which had Texas license and was driven by a young Negro or heavily tanned man, drove off in a northerly direction. So we have here another Rambler station wagon, another heavy set, either Latino or Negro, man, possibly leaving the scene and then coming back to pick someone else up. So interesting, if you believe what Richard Randolph Carr has to say about things, but a lot of people discredit him as a non-credible witness. So it's interesting nonetheless. It seems like an awful lot of people knew about this damn Nash Rambler a month after the assassination. News must travel fast. And then I came across this other interesting document from the Womack Insurance Agency in Hammond, Louisiana. And it's a letter addressed to Clay Shaw, 1313 Dauphine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. Dear Clay, your daddy was in my office this morning and returned the above policy covering liability on the 1962 gray Rambler station wagon. I agreed to hold up cancellation of this policy until I had word from you that you had arranged for coverage with your New Orleans agent. Just for your records, the automobile is described as being a 1962 gray Rambler Ambassador, 4-door station wagon. If you plan to go ahead with your plans to transfer the title of this automobile to your daddy's name, which I believe is a good idea, it will be necessary to complete the forms required by the Department of the Revenue. I checked with Hammond Motors this morning while your daddy was in my office, and they advised it could be best to be done by your coming to Hammond in person. As you know, they are holding the title to the vehicle, and it would be very simple for you to come sign the original title that they are holding and then apply for a certificate of title in the name of G.L. Shaw, your daddy. Up to this writing, I have not had a request from our company to cancel the physical damage coverage, but if you want your agent in New Orleans to go ahead and issue this coverage for your daddy, let me know and I will cancel the physical damage policy. Be sure to drop me a note when your agent has issued the liability coverage so we can process cancellation of our policy. Enjoyed seeing you last Sunday. Wink, wink. I appreciate yours and your daddy's confidence in my abilities, and I'm sorry that there was no other way to work out this insurance problem. Sincerely, T.G. Womack Jr. of the Marquette Casualty Company and the Womack Insurance Agency. This letter is dated, ironically enough, March 24th, 1964. Huh. So it appeared Clay Shaw owned a gray Nash Rambler prior to March of 64. That he was transferred over into his daddy's name for some reason. Very interesting, folks. Very, very interesting. Next up, we have an interview with Richard Magison who we've talked about on this episode before. He was a friend of Lawrence Howard and some of these anti-Castro mercs in Los Angeles. And this is an HSCA memorandum from Kenneth Klein to Robert Tenenbaum. This interview of Richard the Magic Man Magnuson took place on May 17, 1977 in the office of Magnusson's lawyer, Mr. Music. The office is located in Irvine, California. Present were Magnuson, Mr. Music, Clifford Pratt, who is a friend of Magnuson, Cliff Fenton, and myself, Kenneth Klein. Magnuson states that he was a very close friend of Lawrence Howard from 60 to 63. He originally met Howard when they both were members of the United Auto Workers Union and worked together during the strike. He states that Howard was not discharged from the Army but received a, quote, special retirement pension from the Army. He suggests this might be because Howard insinuated he was involved in some kind of covert operations for the Army. He also states that Howard became friends with a general whilst in Korea and suggests this might have been General Walker. He states facts as set forth in the memo supplied to Donovan Gay by Mr. Music. In addition to the facts in the memo, he states that when he asked Tex, later revealed to be William Seymour, what his name was, Seymour said Lee Oswald. It should be noted that no mention of this is made in the memo sent to Donovan Gay. When asked why he did not state this fact in that memo, he replied that he only recently remembered it. He states that Howard has a daddy, a father, Lawrence Howard Sr., who used to live at Loveland Street, Fontana, and now in Bernardino. He states that Howard's father worked for 20 years for Kaiser Steel. He states that when he talked to Tex, Bill Seymour, he asked him whether or not he worked for the CIA, and he said that Tex indicated that he did work with the CIA and showed him a piece of paper with the name of E.H. Hunt and a phone number on it. He said that one of the men working in the building was named Pat, and later learned this man was actually named Loren Hall. He says that Howard went to Mexico at least 4 times in 62 and 63. He states that when Howard came back to California after the end of Operation Mongoose, he said that they were going to do, quote, something very bad that will make the U.S. invade Cuba, end quote. He stated the men who worked in the building disbanded in the winter of 62. Howard did not work in the building, and after bringing Magnuson there, he did not come there again to Magnuson's knowledge. He stated that he investigated and found that Howard did not show up for work for a number of days prior to the assassination, insinuating that he was in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. Howard had worked at a manufacturing plant located at an intersection known as 5 Points in East LA, Holmes, which is in the city of Whittier. The plant makes house trailer frames. Now, you're like, Rob, okay, why are you reading this? Well, here you go. He stated in 1959 or 60, Howard purchased a light blue or green Nash Rambler. It was registered to him or his wife. He couldn't remember. His wife worked for the phone company at the time, and he does not know whatever happened to the car. So, it appears that Lawrence Howard, who fits the description of a heavy-set Latino or Negro, also with a light green Nash Rambler, same as Mrs. Payne, apparently had identical cars. So that's interesting. Oh, show. And speaking of General Walker, HSCA document 180-100-7610-360, dated March 31st, 78, reveals some investigation of a Rambler station wagon in connection with General Edwin Walker, the car being observed at his residence on April 10th, 1963, the same day someone took a hot shot at the general. This, of course, leads us to the photograph of a Nash Rambler in General Walker's driveway, found in the possession of Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, this photo in particular is interesting because it showed that the license plate had been meticulously cut out and removed from this photograph. Who would want to do that? It would appear that possibly this Nash Rambler that was seen and photographed in General Walker's driveway in April of 63 maybe could be tied to something or someone that we have already talked about here today. Interesting. Very, very interesting. The committee had traced a light-colored 59 station wagon seen at a Garland airstrip at that time to the one noticed at General Walker's house, as well as the railroad yard west of the book depository on November the 22nd, 1963. They also found it to be connected to a 59 station wagon bought in Houston, Texas in February or March of 1963. Why is this important? Well, there was a one-page FAA document on which the HSCA probe found, and it involved a flight plan filed by David Ferry on April 8th, 1963. Apparently, he flew 3 passengers listed on this invoice or manifest as Heidel, Lambert, and Diaz from Hammond, Louisiana to Garland, Texas.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash apparently
So there's all that.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
All
Central
very,
Standard
very
Time,
interesting stuff.
2 o'clock
That's it for
Eastern
another episode
Standard Time.
of the Loon Gunman
Some
Podcast.
38
Follow
minutes
along
ago.
at home on Twitter and TikTok at the Loon Gunman 7. Facebook page, search for the Loon Gunman Podcast. And on YouTube, search for the Loon Gunman Podcast channel. Make sure to subscribe and comment, like, get notified when new episodes drop. And feel free to leave a review wherever you are listening to this fine show at. And make sure you check it out. Quick Hits, JFK News and Notes podcast, or whatever the fucking title of it is. You know it. Quick Hits, goddammit. Find it. Search it. And enjoy Shepherd of Fire. They sing us out with their sweet, sweet hit, Conspiracy. It's all about the assassination. Check out the words, people, and rock the fuck out. Peace.
situation room, I read from the AP bulletin. Kennedy apparently shot his head. He fell face down in the back seat of his car. Blood was on his head. Mrs. Kennedy cried, "Oh no!"